podcast. Súbele volumen. Conversation with the people who were with me. In the world TV. Carlos Tonight. Historias de un reportero. Carlos Tonight. Dale que viene lo bueno.
Hey everybody, bienvenidos and welcome to Carlos Tonight. Thanks so much for listening and for watching. My guest this week is not only a professional trapeze artist, but he's also an actor, a dancer, a singer, and a stand-up comic. And now he can add author to that list. His book, Shit My Mama Says, is available on Amazon. Bobby Hedglin-Taylor, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, thanks for having me. Yes, I appreciate that intro. Thank you.
It seems like you do a lot.
Yeah, I'm a little busy. I've always been versatile in the arts, so it's like their medium just changes. Whenever you're, and during the pandemic, you can't really teach trapeze, and during the pandemic, so while we were in lockdown, I started writing. So, and I was like, I'm not a writer, not a chef, not a editor, but I wrote 2 books and I wrote a cookbook. So it's like, I guess I'm a writer now. So,
Right? Nice. And we're connecting. You're in New York. Tell me, how's the weather?
It's chilly. It was funny because it was 68 degrees on Thursday, and then it went down into the 20s on Friday. So it's like, hello, global warming, So,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I walked out of my house on Friday, and it was freezing. I was like, global warming my ass.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Global freezing. No, but still, it was like, it's been, we've been sort of having the rumblings of spring coming, so it's been nice.
Yeah, in the last couple of weeks here in Texas, it's been like one day it's 80, the next day it's like 33, on and on and on. So it's crazy.
You have to like dress for 2 different seasons when you go to work. Like I leave my house at like 70 degrees and then I get to work and it's 40, so yeah. Always leave an extra sweatshirt in my office. So.
Yeah, I should do that too. So your book pays tribute to your mom, who passed away 2 years ago this month. How would you describe your relationship with your mom?
Well, Mom died of COVID in the beginning of the pandemic. And for the previous 5 years, she was in a nursing home and she was dealing with dementia. And then before that, she lived with me, she lived with cousins, and then she lived with my brother. My relationship with my mom was always, she was my best buddy, my best friend, but we also, we had our ups and downs just like any mother and son, but there was always, no matter what the problem was, you always come back to the fact that, you're still my mom and, that kind of thing. So she, growing up, she was not a pleasant person at all. At times could be considered abusive by today's standards, but she was a mom that was a force to be reckoned with, but she also was a sweet, sweet person. She knew values and she instilled lots of values in me that I use today. And even the, being a stand-up comic, sort of new to the stand-up world as far as that goes. I'm in the variety arts world because I'm a circus performer as well. But in that genre, you go through different things in life and you're commenting on them. But with my mom had this indelible, like, coping mechanism. And it basically was, she knew how to make people laugh. She didn't know why, but I do now. I mean, and it's my coping mechanism too. No matter what the situation, no matter how stressful or no matter how sad, she would make us laugh. And when I was growing up, my mother was also a whiz at electricity. So she would wire speakers from the record player in the living room or the 8-track player in the living room, so that we had speakers in the garden, we had speakers out in the yard, whether she was doing yard work or we were working in the garden or she was in the chicken coop. We had music everywhere, but she also had all these stand-up comedy records and 8-tracks. George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, Joan Rivers, all the Borscht Belt comedians, Don Rickles, Dom DeLuise. And
those are all my favorites, by the way.
Yeah, mine too. Robin Williams, Whoopi Goldberg. Yeah. Like, she was a master at them because she would have them on loop. We had the newfangled record player that would keep replaying the same thing, and it had this automatic arm that would just keep replaying. And then we got the 8-track, that the 8-track, you could keep it on loop. So she could just keep playing it over and over and over again. And little did I know she was studying, because she would repeat the jokes at work. And I ended up working with her. We worked in a factory together. From the time I was like 12, I helped, I worked in this factory. Just to support the family, but also as a kid, you want your own sort of money. So, I got a job doing that. I think I made like $3 an hour back then. We were talking way back in the 70s and 80s. And so mom was there, and so I would hear her making other people crack up because she had memorized the jokes. And that was her way, but it was her coping mechanism. And it wasn't until she passed that I realized it's my coping mechanism. I'm the one at the staff meeting who will say the inappropriate things to make people laugh. That's just my nature. And then joining the stand-up world, I'd done stand-up in the 90s when I lived in LA. And I was just doing so many different things as well that, sometimes you have to stop and focus on one thing. I kind of get that. And then most recently in April of this past year, I had hip replacement as well. So being an acrobat for 37 years, now you have the largest joint in your body is now replaced by a mechanical arm, mechanical joint. So I can't perform to the intensity that I was used to ever, really. And so letting that part of my life go, but then transitioning it into something different, like writing. And also, I work in theater a lot. I've always worked in theater. And I've used my circus training in theater, where I can do what's called aerial sequence design and circus sequence design. So if there's a play or a musical that has a moment where an actor has to fly or an actor has to do something in a circus apparatus, that's where I come in and sort of pull the strings and teach them how to do that. And that's what I did for the 4 Broadway shows that I worked on. Those were that's the work that I did. So.
Wow. Great. So I read the book over the weekend.
Yes.
Thanks for sending me a copy. I appreciate
No problem.
that. And now I understand why you described Mary Lou, that's your mom,
Yes.
as a spitfire with a mouth like a truck driver.
Yes.
How was it growing up with that type of personality? You kind of mentioned it at the top.
Embarrassing at times because she had no filter. She gave 0 fucks. I don't know if you have to bleep that out in your podcast, but
No, you're fine.
she gave 0 fucks. Still does. That's in her everyday world. That was who she was, and she didn't care who she offended when. She's an equal opportunity offender, and also that included us as children. So there are times when things are, parents don't. I say this also in the book too. We don't come with an instruction manual as children, and parents don't get an instruction manual to become parents. You kind of figure out what you're doing as you go along.
Right.
You get tips from other parents, you get tips from your parents, and sometimes you recreate your childhood through your children, and sometimes you perpetuate, like I was saying, with what today's standards would be child abuse.
Right.
So there were, my mother was no saint by any stretch of the imagination, but I come to a very peaceful place with that, just because I know who she is, and I know that no matter what she did, not knowing she may be hurting us emotionally, she never set out to do that, but she was only trying to navigate her path throughout that. And they always, Leslie Jordan has the best quote ever. He did a show off Broadway, and it was called Hysterical Blindness. And he said, my mother, she can push my buttons because she installed them. and it's like, yes, my mother knew how to push my buttons because she installed them. And it was, growing up in Pennsylvania was it was a unique experience because, and it's an unlike any other experience that people can have, because I never had a neighbor that wasn't a relative. So my great-grandfather and my grandfather bought plots of land on the top of a mountain in Pennsylvania. And my great-grandfather either gifted or sold plots to his 13 children so that he was surrounded by his children. And I even have one of the deeds. He sold the land for $1. Wow. And so So the entire top of this mountain was all of my Sicilian relatives, basically Sicilian, half Greek. My grandmother was the eldest of 13. She and her first sister were from my great grandfather's first wife, who died of Spanish flu in 1919, I think it was. And then he married a woman from Athens, Jenny Olivia, who gave birth to the rest of the children. So she was half Greek, and so everybody on the mountain was either Sicilian or half Sicilian, half Greek. So I was surrounded by this. It was like the Italian Iana sport, the dysfunctional one. And that's where it got the nickname Ravioli Mountain, because everyone's Italian, everyone was related. And that was the title of the book that I set out to write, which was, and this is not the cut, this is the cover, but Escape to Ravioli Mountain, a memoir in food. Recipes and amusing anecdotes from growing up in a dysfunctional Italian family on a mountaintop in rural Pennsylvania. So that book in itself is not finished yet. I am in editing hell. If you've ever edited anything, excuse me, I'm going to drop something. Editing is one of the hardest things you can ever do, because I write like I speak and I speak like I write. I also used my cell phone to auto dictate a lot of my books.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And what that does is, first of all, autocorrect has a sense of humor, so you have to remember. I call it autocock right now, because it's like no matter what I put in there, it autocorrects it to cock. Seriously, like no matter what I can be saying, I'm like, I don't know what I was saying, but anyway, you have to go through. You have to just email it to yourself, and then remember what you were saying, so that you can make sure that it is correct, and then you edit it down for the page, for the listener, and that in itself was one of the easier parts of the book, was being able to just sit there and speak into a microphone and tell my story. And so with the book about Mom, so pandemic happens, Mom passes. I start writing Escape to Ravioli Mountain, because I'm getting flooded by these backstories, these stories of my first words, stories of when I was on the road with the circus and talking to my grandmother because my dog had been attacked by a groundhog, like all these crazy stories that were coming back to me all at once, which is like floodgates. And then Mom passed, and then I started writing that book first. But then it hit me that I had been sharing her little anecdotes on social media for 6 years with the hashtag Shit My Mama Says. Hence the book cover, hashtag Shit My Mama Says. That's my mama. And yeah, she was giving the finger to the nurse who told her it's time for a bath. So I was doing it already. So a good friend of mine, Sarah, helped me compile. She helped me search through all of my social media, and I had a list of, I think it was like 150 quotes and stories, and I started to put them into one little thing. And it originally, a year to the day that my mom passed, I had started writing her eulogy, because we were doing a memorial service. But then we decided to do a family memorial service, because we had lost 6 people, and there was also an uncle that died in 2014 that we never got a chance to have a service for. So those people were all together. So I didn't want to showboat my mother's memorial or this group memorial, because people were sharing about their parents, and it was my 2 aunts and my mother were all being buried at the same time. My mother had 2 sisters, so all 3 of them got buried at the same time. So we were saying goodbye to all of them. So when I started putting that together, I was writing her eulogy, and I thought, this is bigger than me. And I wanted originally to have her quotes be on little cards and sit on the chairs. But then COVID happened, and then we had more COVID, and then we had to do the service outdoors. So there was a lot of different things that were happening last summer. But as it started to progress, I was like, I want to put a copy of this book into my mother's ash vault, because we buried my mother's ashes next to my father. And so I really pushed. I pushed to make sure that the book was ready by July, because in self-publishing, literally, it only takes 72 hours to get your book published on Amazon. Oh, wow. That's putting it out there. Now you have to make sure it's ready and you have all of the tools. But once you hit publish, it's 72 hours later, and you have a book on your front door. And
Wow.
I was so blown away by that process. I had plenty of guides. I had wonderful people around me. My dear friend Susie is an author. She lives around the corner. And during the pandemic, we became accountability buddies. We would have Sunday cocktails in my garage, socially distant cocktails. I would make, I like to infuse alcohols. So I would make whatever the drink of the week was, and we would have, like a key lime pie, or, we'd have some dessert, and we just sit in my garage and talk, just to have somebody to connect with, even though 6 feet apart with masks on, with the door open, just to have somebody. And she has been like an unbelievable support network. And then my friend Lucia, who lives in Sweden, we went to high school together, and she's also an editor. So we have this bond from high school times that, we still talk every Sunday. And so I've been really lovingly supported by people around me. And then I would send little clips to people that, here's the thing about that too. My therapist once said, "Don't go to the apple tree if you want cherries." And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And basically, if you're sending out something that you want people to read, you also have to accept the criticism that may come back. And they may not be gentle with their criticism. And in fact, sometimes they just may not be even receptive enough to acknowledge that you're being vulnerable. And you have to be very select on that. And I was not very select. And some people I would send it to them, and then, it would be like crickets. And then I would check back in with them, and they're like, well, it's not well written. And I was like, well, thank you. It would have been nice if you would have said it a little differently, or at least, said, hey, I think this could use some edits. There are ways to do that. So be careful. And, like when I tell myself that, because I don't let, and the other thing too, like when I share my work, I am here to not only create my art, but laughter is what I'm after always. I'm a comedian by just existing. I love making people laugh. There's nothing more addicting than standing up in front of people and having them laugh. If you're laughing, you're breathing. And that's another thing. Like the audience takes a breath after your first joke. If your first joke lands, you got them. And that's always the way that I have approached comedy.
By the way, did your mom influence your comedic side?
Yes, because she was very funny. And she had ways of making me laugh and ways of making other people laugh. Like even in the nursing home, she had people in stitches. Even the day,
I bet she was a riot.
the day before she passed, we weren't allowed to visit. The governor shut down visitation to the nursing homes on March 11th. And so by the time Mom passed, on March 20th, the day before, we were talking on FaceTime. The activities director would hold her phone up, and the last picture of us together was us laughing, because she was just, she was being who she was. She wasn't feeling well, but she was laughing. We had that connection. And yeah, she always had ways to make me laugh, and vice versa. And she always came out. There was always some saying. I even added a saying to the book that wasn't in the original version, just because I totally forgot when I was cooking one day. And so, you never know what was going to come out of her mouth, and even as you've read the book, some of the quotes are about body parts, and her nicknames for those body parts, and things like that. So
yeah, I know two things about Mary Lou. Chocolate gave her the shits, and she loved talking about her bug, which is her vagina. What are some other things you want people to know about her?
Well, as a mom, okay, some people set out to be computer technician and then become a parent. Some people set out to be stand-up comic and then become a parent. Some people set out to be a writer and then become a parent. My mom set out to be a parent. She set out all she wanted to do was be a mom. And because she wasn't able to have children, in the very, very beginning of the late 50s, early 60s, they found out that she had what was called an infantile uterus. So she wasn't able to develop, she never had a period, so she never was able to develop eggs. But she was part of, I guess, one of the very first hormonal treatments that helped her uterus grow. And then she got one period. I know that we're talking about my mother's personal life, but hey, she got one period. She got pregnant with my brother. She had my brother. She got her second period, got pregnant with me, and then had her tubes tied. So the woman, when it comes down to your menstrual cycle, she hit the jackpot there. She had 2 periods, 2 kids, and that was it. She was done.
Wow.
So she set out, her goal was, I want to be a mother. And of the three of them, the 3 sisters, my mother was the last to have children, because my other aunts had been, popping them out since the 50s, So when we came along, we were 60s kids. So we basically were the tail end of that generation. So like when I look at my my grandmother's brothers and sisters, she has 2 left. She has 1 brother and 1 sister that are still alive out of the original 13. And then all of my aunts and uncles on both sides of my family are gone. Both of my father, my mother, their brothers, their sisters are all gone. And so my generation, we are now the next in line. We're the next line of defense. So sadly, I know that I'm the youngest of that line, and I know that sadly I'm going to be like my Aunt Jenny right now, watching everybody before me go.
Right.
And that's going to be hard because those are the people that I'm closest to. But I also feel like my mother, her goal in life was to be a mom, and then she didn't care what happened after that.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part about anytime you make a goal. Sometimes you can achieve it so quickly, and then you have nothing else. She was a cobbler at one time, so she made shoes in Jersey City. But for the bulk, most of her adult life, we both worked in a bulk mailing facility in Stroudsburg, where we sent out envelopes stuffed with fabric. If you ever got one of those envelopes that had a sample fabric in it, I helped stuff those. And then, and she also worked in a restaurant. My grandmother, the same thing. My grandmother retired, I think, in 1980. She was actually a air conditioning auto repair. She created the air conditioners for automobiles.
Oh, wow.
Up until she retired, and then she worked in a pizzeria, and I worked with her in that pizzeria. That's how I know how to toss pizza. But I spent a lot of time with my grandmother in the 1970s. So that's part of what Escape to Ravioli Mountain is. It's about those times living and growing up in the 1970s on Ravioli Mountain. And then I get the opportunity to spend time with my mother working in restaurants as well, because we all worked at the same restaurant. So it was very much like it was a family thing that, we not only worked together in the factory, we worked together in the restaurants.
That's awesome.
And then I decided to, in the early 80s, I was like, I'm going to New York. I'm going to move to New York. I want to be in New York. And I had started doing ballroom dancing in Pennsylvania. I got a full scholarship to the Stroudsburg Ballet Theater. And I learned all types of ballroom dance. And then I eventually got a job in New York. And I was performing every Friday and Saturday night at Mama Leone's restaurant. If you've ever heard of Mama Leone's, in the basement of the Milford Plaza. They would bring in an orchestra or just dancers, and we would get people up to dance. So whatever the music was, my ballroom partner and I could recognize it. We would get out, we'd wear tuxedo, and she'd be in a fancy dress, and then we'd perform for, I think it was like $50 a night, and it was like mid 80s. So I knew I was going to move here. I knew I was going to live here. And then I got a full scholarship to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy here in New York. And I was like, that's it, moving, going to New York, going to make it happen.
Let me ask you real quick. According to the Mayo Clinic, more than 3 million people suffer from dementia every year. Yes. What are some of the symptoms? Include forgetfulness. What are the early signs your family experienced with your mom, Mary Lou? And what was it going through it with her?
Well, dementia is a funny thing because people think that dementia and Alzheimer's are the same
The
thing,
same,
and
right?
they're totally different.
Right.
The way that I can describe it is if you show someone with dementia a set of keys, they may know what keys are, but they don't know which key opens which lock. If
Mm.
you show keys to someone with Alzheimer's, they may not know what keys are, let alone what they open. So it attacks a different part of the brain, but it's a very slow, horrible disease. We noticed it around 2009 when mom was just slowing down. She would be forgetful. She would repeat herself. The repeating is sort of like a telltale, like you're repeating yourself. You know, you said that already. Um, the biggest part, I think, that was the hardest part, really, was recognizing when when it was unsafe. And there's a quote that somebody said to me about being a caregiver. There's two quotes that I definitely followed as a caregiver. The first one is check thyself before you wreck thyself. In other words, you have to be able to be this person's guide, and you have to be their voice. And if you are not taking care of yourself, you can't protect them. And that leaves them more vulnerable than you. The other is the adage of when you're sitting in a plane and the stewardess is talking about the oxygen masks. When the oxygen mask comes down, put your mask on, secure your mask first before you assist elderly or children. Make sure that you have your mask on first before you're helping someone else. And again, it goes back to taking care of yourself, because I wasn't taking care of myself. When mom was really having a bad time, I was basically sleeping in a chair next to her bed in the living room, so that when she would get up, I would walk her to the bathroom, walk her back, help her get changed, help her shower, make food for her. And it wasn't until I would make food for her when I would leave for work and I came home and she hadn't eaten it. Even if I called her and said, hey, you know, I made those little omelet cups, you just throw them in the microwave, she forgot how to use the microwave, forgot how to use the remote control. I would come home and the TV would be off and be like, what, why don't you have the TV on? I can't figure it out. I don't know what button I pushed, you know, and it's like, so there were telltale signals. But then when it was really bad was when her health started to deteriorate. She was actually staying with some cousins too. We kind of had, I say we had shared custody. My cousins and I sort of bounced her around so that we could give each other a break and then be able to look after her at the same time. But it wasn't until I got a call from my cousin and mom had set fire to her microwave by putting baby carrots in the microwave. She thought she put it in for 3 minutes. She put it in for 3 hours. And there was, you know, house was full of smoke. My mother was asleep on the couch and the microwave was just like these carrots smoldering. So that was again, she couldn't be left alone. And that was a dangerous thing for her. So that was like, in the book, I even said it's the hardest day of my life was to take on that 100%. I have to care for my mother. And then the 2 times she was here that she had fallen twice. She also had pancreatitis, went into the hospital, went to rehab, and then they released her home before she was ready. And then I still have, I still have these horrible images of why did that happen. And then she also then had a pulmonary embolism, and that was it for me. I was like, I'm going to lose her and this was 2 years before. It was 5 years ago. So it was right when she became a full-time resident at the nursing home. So when she went into the hospital and they released her to the rehab center nursing home, I said, she needs to be a resident. I can't do this to myself. And, you know, everybody makes jokes about Shady Pines, Ma, you know, we've all seen the Golden Girls. But I also was like, I know that I can't be there 24/7. I'm not living. And if I'm not living, I can't help her. I can't help her live. So those 5 years that she was in the nursing home, I visited virtually every day, every week. I would bring her chocolate cakes, as you read in the book. You know, they were her favorite, whether she would, you know, like them or not. I had people from all over the country that were friends of mine who were following Shit My Mama Says as a hashtag that would just call me up and say, what's the address of the nursing home? Or they'd text me and I said, you know, this is the address. And they would send her candy. They would send her gifts. They would send her cards. They would send her photos.
Sweet.
And it was just people that she never knew who they were. She was like, who is this guy Durwood from Atlanta? And it was a friend of mine who just sent her a card saying, hey, you know, I'm friends with Bobby. He was telling me you're in the nursing home. I hope you're doing well. I hope you get better. Somebody sent her a miniature Christmas tree. Somebody sent flowers. So it was like every week we would have, my friends sent pictures. And the best was one of my friends, Marissa, sent her a journal, but also sent her blank cards so that she could write to Marissa. So we would do that together. We would write a letter to Marissa and put it in the card, and then, you know, and send it off. And then the other thing was Marissa would send her markers and coloring pages because she loved coloring, and they did a lot of art in the nursing home as well. So, so going back to your question, it is gut-wrenching because you're watching them slowly fade away. You're watching them die one day at a time, something they lose one day at a time.
Right.
Whether it's their hearing, whether it's, you know, they become incontinent, their teeth, their memories, you know, and then they start to remember people that they haven't seen in a while because those people are passed on, but they don't remember them passing on. So, you know, there's actually a couple of great TikTok channels that I follow, and one of them is a hospice nurse who talks about death and dying. And it's very comforting to know that there are specific things that happen in the process. And one of them is, I can't remember the name of it, but it's when people who are in the state of dementia or Alzheimer's start to see people that have passed on, dogs. It's close to the end is what it is. And in January of 2020, Mom was asking about my dad. She was asking about my grandmother. She was asking about her cat Pebbles. She was asking about her dog Reese, you know, so she had all these. Oh, and one of the activities directors resembled my cousin Angelina. And Angelina had passed away, but Mom said, you know, Angelina's working here. And I was like, oh, okay. So she may have been, you know, she may have been there. And, you know, my cousin Angelina was a sweet, sweet, sweet girl. And if anything, Angelina was looking out for my mom from the other side through the activities director. And, you know, so that's the hard part. The hardest part about it is watching them deteriorate and losing little bits of them. I was lucky. My mom got very sweet. And there are some people who don't have that. Some people get very angry and very agitated. Mom had that. And, you know, they had a mood altering drug that helped her get back on track. But thankfully, I didn't have to deal with that type of a personality coming back at me when I'm just trying to help. And that's the other thing that's really hard for some caregivers is accepting what is this person actually going through and why are they so agitated and how can I get them back? And the way that I got my mom back was making her laugh. Same way she got me back. So it was a cycle, and I was able early on to know her triggers and be able to make her laugh and be able to tease her and be able to, you know, snap her out of whenever she was in those angry phases.
So from everything that your mom said, is there a favorite quote from her that you remember, or is there like a popular quote that everyone kind of liked?
The other thing, I was thinking about making T-shirts, and it just didn't work out. Some of them are just not. I mean, you know, some of them are funny, you know, but I was like, but it's like my favorite quote is my friend Jamie Lee was 9 months pregnant, and I showed my mother a picture of Jamie Lee, belly out to here. And my mom looks at it and she goes, oh, she could go anytime. Hey, tell her to get a barbecue chicken wing and dangle it down there. It'll coax him out. It worked for you, Bob. You know, so that was my favorite. That and I don't drink water. Fish fuck in it. So that
Oh
was,
yeah, I remember
when
that.
the nurse was bringing her pills, she was like, I don't drink water, fish fucking it. So she had that one, and that was the T-shirt I was thinking. I don't drink water, fish fucking it.
Or who do I have to fuck to get some
Who do
coffee
I have to
around
get
here?
who do I have to get a cup of coffee here? Yeah,
Yeah.
she had so many, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple because like I literally like would write them down. I still have them in the notes section of my phone because she would just randomly spout out things, and and she just gave zero fucks.
Yeah.
Gave zero fucks. She didn't care.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere where you described her as Sophia Petrillo on steroids. Is that
Actually,
right?
that was a review on Amazon. One of the
That's where I
reviewers.
said, okay.
Yeah. So
I'm like,
so I've been blessed with amazing reviews on Amazon. So here's the thing. Amazon reviews, and anybody who has my book, please out there, please go to the Amazon page, even if you didn't buy it on Amazon, because I've sold it. I've sold it personally. I've sold it at book fairs. I had my first consignment in Indiana. So I'm excited about, if anybody who has my book, go to Amazon, write a review. So one of my favorite reviews is this fabulous woman is like Sophia Petrillo on steroids, and that was because my grandmother was Sophia Petrillo. My grandmother so there should actually be another book or like a little annex to this book called Shit My Grandma Said, because my grandmother had a way with words as well, and there's like hundreds of times where I was like, oh my God, I should have been writing this down, because my grandmother had the same potty mouth as mom. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Excuse me. And let me see. Oh, so here's a classic example. So my grandmother and I used to go food shopping together. She almost got arrested because we were in the olive oil aisle. And when you're selecting olive oil, you open it up, you put a drop in your hand, you rub your hands together and smell it. And if you smell that green, rich olive flavor scent, then you buy that bottle. She literally opened every brand of olive oil and got arrested in the supermarket.
oh my God.
She also was the type of a grandma that there was company toilet paper and there was everyday toilet paper. So when the company was there, the toilet paper was powder blue. When there was no company there, it was white. So she was buying both types of toilet paper. And then she looks at her receipt and she's like, why are you taxing the blue toilet paper, not the white toilet paper? And the girl behind the desk is like, oh no, the colored toilet paper requires a luxury tax. My grandmother stares her dead in the face and says, as if your asshole's going to know the difference.
Nice.
So she had, like she when she was teaching me how to make sauce, she was like, don't put too much salt, it'll taste like cat piss. So between the two of them, these are the two women that basically raised me and shaped me into the nut job that you see in front of me. No, so there are many quotes, and I even had trapeze students who were like, you should have shit Uncle Bobby says, because they call me Uncle Bobby.
Uncle Bobby.
Because I've always had my own catchphrases when teaching people. Different ways to get into certain positions in the air. I'm trying to describe what your body's supposed to do. So
you're working on a second book.
I am.
You mentioned earlier, Escape to Ravioli Mountain, a memoir in food.
Yes.
What can we expect from that book?
Well, there are 146 recipes. There are, I would say, 36 stories about my family growing up. This is one of the family photos. That's
wow.
My grandmother, and all 13 of her brothers and sisters. That is wedding anniversary for my great grandpa in 1960, I think it was. This is my great grandma. This is my great grandma in the middle there. That is Elsie Spatusi, and she was born in Sicily, and she is the mother of my grandmother and her first sister, Beatrice, and then she died of the Spanish flu in 1919. And ironically, my mother died of COVID. So very strange finding all that out. But it's like opening a photo album. Like if you go to somebody's house and you open a photo album, you're like, what is this? What is this picture? And then there's food in those pictures. It's like, oh, that's my recipe for salmon with blood oranges and fennel, or that's my recipe for shrimp salad with fennel, or that's my recipe for my lasagna, or my baked ziti, or what's that? That looks like something different. Oh, that's my gluten-free baked ziti for people who can't have gluten. So it's like opening a photo album and having one of the things my mother taught me is that if anybody comes to my house and goes away from my table hungry, it's their own damn fault. And she would, even if she knew somebody had dietary issues, she would have something for them, no matter what it was. Even if she would have to get something and make it for them specifically, she always did that. So whenever I have people over and I know they're gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, vegetarian, whatever, pescatarian, whatever it is, I make sure that I have options for those people. And I realized this. A lot of people were doing the Atkins diet not so long ago, so they couldn't eat a lot of the carbs that I were. So I had specific things put out for them. I made a quinoa bar for all the vegetarian and vegans, so that they could have a bowl of quinoa with all these roasted vegetables. And chapter 2 is called Antipasto, and auntie spelled Auntie, because all of my aunts were the queens of the Antipasto platter. So the stories that go along with that, and then how to create your own Antipasto platter for everybody. I created a vegan Antipasto platter. I created a regular, and every single recipe in the book that has meat in it has a vegetarian or vegan option within reason. I mean, there's some that you just, if you're looking to cook steak, there's not much you can do unless you're doing a cauliflower steak or a portobello mushroom, something like that.
So for me, like any type of meal or a certain type of meal would kind of give me a flashback to my childhood or like a situation I was in. Is there a meal that kind of reminds you of your mom or a certain situation between the two of you?
There are two. First of all, my mom and I was just talking to my friend Lucia about this. My mom and I would have, in the spring, we would make sausage and passata on the same day. Now, passata is nothing more than tomato puree, but my mother loved her gadgets, and she just bought in this brand new gadget that takes the peel and the skins, or the skins and the seeds off of the tomato, and just gives you pure tomato puree. Normally, we would boil the tomatoes, shock them in ice water, peel them, press them through a sieve, and then throw away the seeds and the skins. That takes hours, and we would do that together on Saturdays in my grandmother's garage. My grandmother also had a turn of the century sausage machine, and it was one of these big iron crank things, and we'd make our own sausage, and then they would argue about how much fennel to put in. But the meals, the two meals, one with my mother and one with my grandmother. The one with my mother was a master at eating economically. So eating on a dime in the 1970s, my mother could do. And it was one of the simplest recipes, and I've updated it since. But it was cartwheel pasta with peas, garlic, and Parmesan. Very simple recipe. And then I updated it for the 2000s, where you make homemade orecchietti. And yeah, I spoke just like Giada De Laurentiis. Homemade orecchietti, the cabaletta, orecchietti, which is little ears, and then with spring peas, and it's a white wine sauce. So I updated it. So there's the 1970s version, and then there's the updated version, and that always reminds me of my mom, because when we were kids, that was like the meal that we loved vegetables, we loved pasta. So it was just this, that the house would smell like garlic, and it was nothing more than a box of pasta, a can of peas, and some cheese, and we were happy. The other is my grandmother's sauce. Now, I would spend hours with my grandmother making pasta by hand and also making sauce from scratch. And the sauce would cook for sometimes 3 days. And a lot of times we would have the sauce on Saturday night. And then on Sunday morning, she would make eggs in purgatory, which is basically like an Italian version of shakshuka, which is you poach the eggs in the sauce from the day before. But on Saturdays, that's when we'd have the family together, and there would be this huge bowl of pasta. But no matter what the meat items were, my grandmother had one secret. I'll tell you the secret. You don't have to buy the book for this one. She had a big double sink in the kitchen, and then a stove, sometimes 2 stoves, depending on, a lot of Italian kitchens, you have 2 kitchens. I don't know why. I only use one. But in between the sink and the stove was a yardstick. She'd pull the yardstick out, put it on the cutting board. She'd take a big slab of pepperoni and cut exactly 4 inches. Exactly 4 inches of pepperoni, take the skin off, and put that in the bottom of the pot before she even put onions, garlic, nothing, before she started her sauce. And that pepperoni would melt into the sauce. And overnight, the entire sauce would just begin to take on that flavor. And all of those spices would leach out into the sauce. And that was the smell that I still like. I know I can recreate it but there's just nothing like the way that your grandma used to create.
Yeah, exactly.
But those are the 2 that
sounds good.
Bring me back. Yeah, I swear to you. So here's the other thing: when you live on a mountaintop in Pennsylvania, and you're poor, we were not rich, so we relied on deer meat, bear meat. We also housed our own chickens, ducks, turkey. We livestock, not so much, because by that time when I was born, it just was too much to maintain pigs and cows, because we used to have a pen, and we used to have pigs. There's a chapter called Lucky the pig. He was a family pig, and he was trained. He was the only animal allowed inside the house. My grandmother would let him come in. He would sit in front of the fireplace and then go let himself back into the pen. He was apparently a brilliant pig. I don't know. Anyway, so that time period, sometimes you get deer meat. So a lot of my recipes, like my mom used to make deer jerky. She used to put the deer meat into the sauce. So we never knew what the sauce was. We never knew what meat was in there. So, sometimes my grandmother would just, like, whatever it was, she would just throw it in the bottom of the pot, and then, you'd have this delicious ragu the next day. So.
Nice. Bobby Hedglin-Taylor, thank you so much. How can people connect with you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Instagram and TikTok, EscapeToRavioliMountain, and also Instagram and TikTok, Bobby Hedglin-Taylor. Facebook, EscapeToRavioliMountain. You can follow the cookbook. And then follow the hashtag on all social media, Shit My Mama Says. And you'll find me there. If you're also, I'm an ordained minister, so I have Weddings by Bobby, if you're ever interested and you need somebody to perform your wedding. And then I'm on Twitter at Why Walk When You Can Fly, and LinkedIn, any of those. Just do it.
Great. And I'm going to include that in the show notes so everyone knows.
And, and I really want to encourage people to write. I'm not a writer. I didn't graduate college. I barely made it through English class, but I made these books happen, and I was surrounding myself with good people. And people are like, oh, I don't know how to write. I can't do that. I don't know what to do. I'm like, you'll find a way. My mom talks through me every day. My mother made it to 8th grade. She never graduated from high school. So she talks to me in my brain every day. But I also know that I'm surrounded by good people, and I surround myself with people who either can guide me or can at least give me a little bit more of a boost in the self-esteem department, because artists are always hard on ourselves, always.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Bobby, I just want to wish you continued success. Good luck with the books. Thank you for sharing your mom with us, and good luck, and God bless you.
You too.
In the world TV, Carlos tonight, historias de un reportero.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for watching and for listening to this episode of Carlos Tonight. It was written and produced by yours truly, Carlos Correa. My theme was by Sken, Galis. You can check out more information on the podcast at carlostonight.com. You can also see upcoming guests and check out past episodes. That's carlostonight.com.